readings are taken from the Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week, does God hide the truth? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it and your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In last week's reading, we saw that the great masters themselves counseled discretion in the dissemination of truth. The counter-argument is sometimes made, but the Lord doesn't hide. He reveals his beauty in the sunsets, his tender sympathy in the rain, his wrath in the thunder, his restless energy in the brooks, his power in the sunlight. There are exoteric truths, and there are also esoteric truths. There is that which is revealed impersonally and left up to us to interpret, such as the thunder and our perception of it as divine wrath, the rain and our perception of it as God's sympathy. But behind even God's most open expressions, there lies impenetrable mystery. The wind blows where it wills, said Jesus in chapter 3 of the Gospel of St. John. You hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. And Sri Krishna says in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, by me the whole vast universe of things is spread abroad, by me the unmanifest. In me are all existences contained, not I in them. God's hidden reality cannot be understood by the reasoning faculty. India's Sankhya philosophy states frankly, Ishwara Ashida, God is not provable. A willingness to seek the underlying reality behind appearances is essential for those who would know God. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning again. I rarely get to do this twice in a row. It's really fun. And my name is Lorna, and this is Mari and Hanuman. I have the joy to be with them this morning too, and that's really fun. And I really appreciate you guys coming out to join me, because I have to show up. It's nice that other people showed up too. This morning, I had a lot of fun looking at things about this topic. So this verse from the Bible, Jesus is saying, the wind blows where it wills. He's talking to a man named Nicodemus, who is a Pharisee. And in these times, and in the Jewish tradition, the Pharisees were people who were learned and were scholars and were sort of they were different than the priests, but they were the group that sort of kept the law. And they were very, very into the minutia of the law. And all throughout the story of Jesus, you see him talking about the Pharisees, and the Pharisees getting upset with Jesus because the Pharisees they felt and believed that the only way to really have a relationship with God and to be in line with God's will was to follow all of the laws. And there were a lot of them. We think of the 10 Commandments. Well, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of laws that the Jewish people had created over time to try to be in line with what they thought was God's truth. And so you get these conversations with Jesus in the Bible about, the man accusing him, saying, why do your disciples not follow the law, and they eat without washing their hands, and they don't do it the right way? And Jesus saying, that's not what we're here for. And so he's talking to Nicodemus, who is actually in sympathy with Jesus and is one of them who actually followed Jesus. Nicodemus is the character who also, at the end of Jesus' life after the crucifixion, he brings precious ointments and very expensive burial ritual ointments and things to prepare Jesus' body. So you get the feeling that he was a disciple of Jesus, but he was also a Pharisee. He was also a member of the Sanhedrin, who were actually the judges in the body that actually condemned Jesus to death. Not that Nicodemus was with them in that, but he was part of that group. So he comes to Jesus and says, I know you're of God, basically, but I still don't really understand. And that's why Jesus is telling him, he uses this line, the wind blows where it wills. You hear the sound of it, but you don't know where it comes from or where it's going. So is everyone who's born of the Spirit. You can't take God and pin it down. Remember that song in Sound of Music, the one about Maria? How do you catch a cloud and pin it down? That's what comes. You can't do that with Spirit. You can't box it in and frame it and line it up and get it all in a row and all with your intellect to where you understand every piece of it, which is what the Jewish people were trying to do. Jesus came in and sort of blew the lid off of that and said, there's a different way of doing this. What you do is you love God and you love each other. And you have to be Spirit. You have to be flowing. The answers lie in allowing that Spirit to flow through you, and that wind of Spirit will guide you and direct you and answer all your questions. He actually also tells Nicodemus a little bit further on, he says, we speak of what we know and what we've experienced. That's what yoga is, isn't it? This is what yoga is based on. What is your experience of the truth? Go with that. Don't try to figure out all the things that don't make sense to you and that you can't really relate to. Go with your experience. Try it for yourself, and then use that as your foundation. Use that as the place where you stand. So he's telling Nicodemus, this is what we do. We're speaking, this is not theoretical. We're speaking from what we know and what we've experienced. And you still won't listen to us. That's what he says. So he's telling us, as in the reading, that there's exoteric. Exo is the word for outer, and then esoteric. Eso means within. It just means inner. So there are truths that we see that are pretty obvious, that everybody can kind of relate to. And then there are more subtle laws, more subtle realities that we have to tune into and that we have to work harder to understand. What Swami says in the reading is, a willingness to seek the underlying reality behind appearances is essential for those who would know God. You start with the outer, but then you've got to go deeper. You've got to look for what's behind that if you really want to know what's going on, if you really want to know that Spirit, if you want to feel that presence of God within you, you have to go beyond what's obvious. And Swami tells in his book, The New Path, which is his story about finding his guru and learning from him, he says, at first, unaware as yet how deeply impersonal his consciousness was, speaking of Yogananda, I saw him rather as a great and wise man. He sought to help me expand my mental horizons. Looking deeply into my eyes one day, he said, if you knew my consciousness, if you knew. And that in another part, Swami says, I used to pray to Master, teach me to love you as you love me. Chatting with a group of us one day after hours in the main office, he looked at me penetratingly and said, how can the little cup expect to hold the whole ocean of love? First, it has to expand and become as big as the ocean. That's why we have our affirmation today about expansion. Self-expansion. We have to expand. The masters are constantly telling us, if you read any of the scriptures, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, any of the masters, they are constantly telling us to let go of our little self, to to expand our awareness, that we have to get bigger. We have to let go little habits, little concerns, little fears, the littleness of life, and we have to get bigger. We have to expand our cup. Because God is trying to pour that wisdom, that grace, and that love, that light into us all the time. But if our cup is just this small, that's all we can take. So we have to constantly work on getting bigger. Yogananda says, if you want to understand this life, you must remember the fine work he is doing in the flowers, the flame of his mind that is burning in our thoughts, the thoughts that are pouring from our souls, and the worlds upon worlds that are spread out over the great vastness of the cosmos. How vast is that God, and yet we feel him in our consciousness. Our lives are a reflection of that spirit. No life can exist without the ocean of life behind it. So we must realize that great ocean of life throbbing behind our lives. The vastness is just beyond our comprehension. But we need to try to expand, try to get beyond the boundaries that we set for ourselves. He also said, behind the wave of your consciousness is the sea of God's presence. You must look within. Don't look at the little wave of the body with its weaknesses, but look beneath. Close your eyes, and you see only the vast omnipresence before you, everywhere you look. You are in the center of that vast sphere, and as you lift your consciousness from the body and all its experiences, you will find it is filled with the great joy and bliss that lights the stars and gives power to the winds and storms. God is the fountain of all our joy and all the manifestations in nature. We have to go within to find that doorway. He mentions nature here, all the manifestations in nature. Master actually said the great variety that we see in nature is a lesson for us. It's a symbol to us. It's a reminder of how infinite God is, can manifest in all these different ways. It's really fun to meditate on and to think about. Think about a jellyfish and the differences between a jellyfish and a squirrel. You know? It's just amazing to think about. It expands your ideas. And somebody mentioned to me yesterday that she loves to touch the rose petals. She loves the feeling of the rose petals, the softness of the rose petals in her hands. But imagine the softness of the rose petals, and then imagine a sea urchin, or the rough texture of a fir tree. The variety and the ways that God can appear to us and manifest. Imagine the movement of a swallow, the way that swallows swoop down and grab insects, and you can watch them out in the fields. In the field there near our community, sometimes I'll see swallows out there in the evening just as the bugs are floating around, and the swallows just swoop down with this beautiful, graceful movement and catch those bugs. And then imagine, yesterday I saw this big snail making its way along the leaf of one of the plants in my garden. It's just mind-boggling. And it really is fun to expand your awareness of God's presence in all of those different ways. In the yogic teachings, they say there are 8 manifestations of God. Light and love, power, sound, wisdom, joy, peace, and calmness. That was a test. But within all of those manifestations are an infinite number of ways that you can experience peace, infinite number of ways you can experience wisdom. But in nature, often it seems easier to do that. The vibration is more pure, the presence of God seems to be closer. Maybe it's the combination of all of the senses, the visual, the smell, the sights, the sounds that we can relate to, and sometimes that presence of spirit seems a lot more alive to us. Many of you are aware of Joseph Bharat Cornell. He goes by the name of Bharat, and he's a devotee of Yogananda and a member of Ananda, not here in Portland. He lives in California at the village down there, and he's done several different books. His first one was Sharing Nature with Children, and he is a naturalist and has gone all over the world teaching and sharing how to relate to spirit in nature. And his latest book is this one, Deep Nature Play. And it's wonderful. If you haven't picked it up yet, it's not that long, but it has some beautiful exercises and wonderful reminders of how to relate to spirit through the natural world. And there's two things that jumped out at me when I was thinking about this topic this morning. One is he discusses how you can attune yourself to the natural world by being aware or trying to put yourself into the object of your, what do I want to say? What it is you're working on. Anyway, I'll read the words, and better than me saying it. He says, many celebrated inventors and artists and writers and Nobel Prize winning scientists credit their discoveries and creations to an ability to get inside their subject in a lot of different ways. And he talks about this one woman, a Nobel laureate, Barbara McClintock, who is a molecular biologist. And she says she placed herself inside the corn genes and chromosomes she studied. She attributed her pioneering discoveries to having a feeling for the organism. She says, it surprised me because I actually felt as if I were right down there and these were my friends. She was talking about looking in the microscope at these microscopic little things that she was studying, that she was able to relate to them and put herself within that reality. In his nature activities, he has an activity, an exercise that he calls I Am the Mountain. And in that one, the player, observes any beautiful part of nature that inspires them and tries to feel the essence of that tree or that flower or that cloud or whatever it is that they're looking at within themselves, and tries to feel, perhaps how that tree is rooted and how its branches are spreading and how it sways in the wind. Swami described this as, in terms of relating to other people, he would describe it as relating from your center to the other person's center. To try to feel that you are actually a part or within that other person, or your center is relating to theirs. It's a wonderful exercise to do if you're out in nature anywhere, but it also is a challenge to us to try to do that in our everyday life. As I walk around Home Depot, in my job, it's constantly inspiring to me because we have this huge variety of people that come through there. And I'm forced to relate to all of these people in ways that these are people I probably never would experience or come across in the rest of my life. And they don't show up here. So there I am in Home Depot, and I have to relate to them. And it's fun. It's gotten to be really fun to look at I see the whole families. The other day there was this whole family like with 5 kids, mom, dad, and you could tell, they all looked like each other, and I could tell they all belonged together. And they were this little family group moving around the store, going through their list and getting the things that they needed. And for a moment, I just thought, what would it be like to be a part of that family? To look like they look, to be all excited about getting the nuts and bolts and screws or whatever it is they were shopping for that day, to be riding in the shopping cart and having your big brother push you along, and the contractors who come in, these worker guys, that just, they're all dirty and grubby, and they come in at 6 o'clock in the morning, they've already been on the job for a while, and they're there to pick up whatever they need, and they're so determined, and they know exactly what they want, and they've got their thing, and they've got to get out of there and get back to work. And what would it be like to be in that bhav and to be in that mindset? It's really helped me a lot to just appreciate every individual that comes in there and to try to work from my center to their center. What is their reality? You know, you can do it with a tree. The tree just stands there. Tree just stands there and lets you do whatever you want to do. But with people, it can be a little bit more challenging, but it's all so much more fun. The other exercise that he has in here is called expanding circles. And in expanding circles, you choose a place outside somewhere where there's something in the foreground that's interesting to look at, but then there's also an expansive horizon. There's a vista, so it doesn't work real well if you're in the forest with trees all around you. You have to be somewhere where you can actually see out, because what you do is you start with what's in front of you. And the exercise is to begin right there in front, looking at, appreciating, opening your heart, and experiencing whatever that is that's right there in front of you. Perhaps it's a little bush, it's a rock, and it's there. Then what you do after you feel that you've really gone deeply into that, then you expand. It's like dropping a pebble in the water, then you have another circle. So then you expand and you look a little wider. And you look at what's there, and you appreciate, oh, there's a bush over there, there's more rocks there. There's, you know, a footprint from an animal there, something, and you expand your awareness. And then you go a little farther, and then you go a little farther, until you expand your awareness and your consciousness to the farthest horizon that you can see. And it's again, a wonderful way to be more and more conscious and to feel that your consciousness can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can relate to the rock that's right in front of you the same way that you can relate to the farthest cloud on the horizon. And again, this is a really good exercise for us to do in our own life, in the circumstances that we're within, because we have a tendency to narrow our focus down to just what's right in front of us. What do I have to deal with right now? What is it that's looming large in my consciousness? This challenge, this problem, this physical pain that I have, this, you know, financial challenge that I have, this issue with this person, this job that I don't really like, this, you know, the fact that my coffee is cold, or whatever it is that's right there that we're having to deal with. And our focus gets that small. And then if we consciously try to go to, we have to deal with that. It's a reality that's there, that's put in front of us. We have to deal with it. But sometimes it really helps to try to expand beyond that. What else is there? Expand beyond that cold cup of coffee to what else is happening. Expand it to include what else is going on here? Who else is involved? What about that person that sold me the cup of coffee this morning? What is their reality? What about the people that I see just within my circle here? What about the circumstances that are beyond where I can't see? What about, you know, a larger field of vision, and you get gradually bigger and bigger and bigger until that thing that you're dealing with right in front of you is a lot smaller. You gain a whole different perspective. And you still, like I said, you still may have to deal with it. It still may take a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of commitment, courage, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, whatever it might take to deal with that thing that's right there in front of you. But if you've expanded your awareness beyond to include a larger reality and remember that everything is connected to that, it can change things. It can change you. Master said, Master meaning Yogananda, he wrote a poem called Samadhi, which is about that state of awareness that is beyond my understanding, but it's the state of awareness. He tries to describe that unity, that awareness of infinity, of beyond what we can see and feel in this little self here. And he said, it's a good practice to read that every day. I don't. I go through periods of time where I try to read it, and then I put it down. I don't read it every day. But every time I do, I see something else, and another line I'm more aware of, and it does exactly what he wants it to do. It expands my awareness. It makes me think, wow, I'm not there yet, and I need to keep working on getting bigger and bigger. A small part of that, he says, is enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy. Samadhi bliss. Every single line in this poem you can take and meditate on for years. Not a mental chloroform or unconscious state without willful return. Samadhi but extends my conscious realm beyond the limits of the mortal frame to farthest boundary of eternity. To the farthest boundary of eternity, where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. The ego is our little identification with this little self. Imagine being the farthest boundless of eternity, and you can still see the little ego, Lorna little ego, floating around in there, this little pinpoint, but your awareness is expanded. In the Bhagavad Gita, the reading that we heard today, it says, by me the whole vast universe of things is spread abroad. By me the unmanifest. In me are all existences contained, not I in them. Oddly enough, this is a common misunderstanding. I've had a lot of conversations with people who will say things like, well, why do we even have to pray? Why do we even have to come to service? Why do we even have to have a religion or have a spiritual community or have... because if it's all in me, then I should be able to just sit down, meditate, or go inside and find all the answers and find God there and have that experience. I don't need anything else if it's all within. Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. But the point is, first of all, we have this little ego that gets in the way, that defines things for us and tells us how to think and doesn't want us to expand our awareness. Our ego doesn't want us to go bigger and bigger. Our ego wants us to stay nice and small and comfortable in where we know and where we're able to relate very comfortably. But the other problem is, it's one of these points of confusion. Here in the Gita, he's saying, in me all existences are contained, not I in them. The teachings don't say that God is in here, that everything, that we are the container. We're not the container. We are a part of all that is. We are part of this. And in everything, God is the container. Spirit is what we're a part of. When we go inside, when we get quiet, when we meditate, what we're doing is we're knocking on the door. The door to that understanding, the door to that awareness, the door to infinity, the door to that understanding of who and what we really are, that we're really bigger than this. Meditation is the doorway. It's not the answer. Meditation is the doorway. And it might help you. It helps me to meditate, to be aware of that what I'm doing. Last week we read that the quote by Jesus when he said, those who knock, anyone who knocks, the door will be answered, the door will open. If you seek and you'll find. So when we sit down to meditate and we're quiet and still, we get to that doorway that opens, get to that star, doorway that opens into that eternity where we can say, oh, I'm a part of all that is. I'm a part of this, and I can see my little ego floating in that sea of cosmic awareness. In our meditations, too, it's helpful to take those problems, those things that loom so large in our consciousness, and we talk about offering them. What we want to do is try to bring that awareness, that consciousness that is focused on that one thing, bring it up to the spiritual eye and offer it into that doorway, into that eternity, into that star and that awareness. Because in our spines, all the little vrittis, all the little, the karma and the habit patterns and the things that catch us, those get in the way. The more we can move it up the spine, here to the spiritual eye, where it can go through that doorway, where we can offer it into that infinity, then the more free we will be, the more that energy will be moving upwards. Swami, again in another book, he quotes Jesus. Jesus said, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So this is not to make us feel inadequate. This is just saying you need to reach farther. You need to expand your awareness. If you really want to be in tune with God, if you really want to understand that reality, you need to get bigger. You need to realize that the ways of spirit are beyond the little intellect, beyond the little reasoning power that we have to try to figure it all out. We have to try to reach for spirit, and we have to try to get in tune with that wind, the wind that blows where it wills. The masters are here to show us that. And the amazing thing about our path, and in fact we have 5 of them up here, is that it shows us how many different ways spirit can manifest. All of the avatars are equal in spirit. They're all equally free. They're all equally in tune with that spirit. They all are on the same level of super consciousness, but they all manifest it differently. And it's a wonderful thing. When we say the prayers, we invoke all the presence of each one of those masters, and it's another good exercise for us to try to tune into each one of them individually. Try praying to just one of them. Try to tune into that, the way God is manifest through that master, through Jesus and his compassion and his surrender to God's will. We think of it as sacrifice, but it's just complete and utter surrender. Nothing else is needed except to do the will of God. And such incredible love and compassion that came through him. Through Babaji, who has this amazing, deathless body that just goes on, and we hear stories about him just appearing and disappearing and blessing and guiding the entire consciousness of the planet. If you want expansion, he's a good one to think about or to try to tune into, So Yukteswar even said, you can't, his consciousness is beyond comprehension. But try it, it's good. Try to comprehend it. Lahiri Mahashaya is the selfless service of him offering Kriya to the world. The stories you read about him being a government accountant and just giving his life completely and totally to whatever his guru, Babaji, wanted him to do. And he said, spread the message of Kriya, give Kriya. And so it's what he did all of his life. It's just try to lead souls back to God and give them the tools that they needed to do that. And Yukteswar, in his strength and in his learn to behave, his total commitment to just what is right, what is true, what is God, what is that incredible discrimination and wisdom and complete, what do I want to say, disinterest in anything else but God. What is right, what is true. This is how to behave, this is how to find God. If you want to go that way, I'll lead you. If you don't, that's fine. I'm not interested. This is the way to go. And Master Yogananda, the incredible love and bliss and joy, the smile millionaire. He said for us to be the smile millionaire, to smile, to laugh, to feel God's joy in everything. Any one of these will help us to expand our consciousness to where we want to go. and they're there to help guide us and show us the way. And a last thought from Swami. He talked about his fellow monks sometimes and his frustration sometimes with them in their limited understanding, because they were dedicated to Master. They wanted Yogananda to lead them to bliss, to take them to God, to give them samadhi, so they have that experience. But they didn't understand sometimes why they had to do other things. Why do I have to mix this cement and work on this project? What does that have to do with finding God? Why do we have to do these other things that seem so mundane in life? And Swami, in his writings, he says, "Oh, blind ones, can't you see that self-transformation is a total process? That what the Master gives us spiritually must be perceived on every level of our being, in everything. God is just as much present in the cement, in the projects, at Home Depot, with our families, in our schools, with our children, with our pets, with our bank account. God is equally present in all of those things. And what we have to learn to do, as these masters did, is learn to see that and understand that and transcend it. Transcend the mundane, to see God everywhere. Swami says, from the thought, nothing is divine, man must grow to the realization, everything is divine. I have a Whispers from Eternity for you. My eyes are enthralled, O Father, with the beauty of earthly flowers, with life's passing scenes, and with the sailing silent clouds. Everywhere, all I see hints at thy hidden presence. Open that eye in me which sees only thee. With that gaze may I behold thee above, beneath, all around, within and outside me. Teach me in all things to see only thee. Open in me that eye which beholds everywhere thy hidden but ever subtly reigning wonder. Om, peace, amen.